He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood at the far end of the room with a glass of whiskey frozen halfway to his lips, staring at her like she had just walked out of a dream he hadn't earned the right to have. Every conversation in that room died for 3 seconds. 3 full seconds of silence in a room full of New York's most powerful men. And every single one of them was looking at Lucia Bennett, the waitress nobody had ever bothered to learn the name of. Adrian Romano set his glass down very slowly. His jaw tightened, and something dangerous moved behind his eyes. If you're new here, subscribe to our channel and follow this story all the way to the end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Lucia Bennett had been invisible for so long that she had almost made peace with it. Not the kind of invisible that makes you feel small. She had never let herself feel small. But the kind of invisible that settles over a person, like a second skin, when they spend enough years moving through rooms where they don't belong. When you carry plates to people who don't look up. When you smile at guests who look through you like you're made of glass. When the name on your name tag is just a formality because nobody's actually reading it. She had worked the dinner shift at Romano's for 3 years. 3 years of 12-hour Fridays of double shifts on holidays of standing on her feet until her lower back ached in a way that no amount of sleep ever fully fixed. 3 years of learning which regulars wanted their wine poured first and which ones wanted to order everything at once. 3 years of memorizing the preferences of 200 different guests who would not have recognized her face on the street. She didn't complain about it. That wasn't Lucia's way. Her way was to get through it. To pocket the tips, to pick up the extra hours, to be the last one to clock out, and the first one to show up when someone called in sick. Because Marcus needed his tuition paid. Because the medical bills from her mother's hospital stay 3 years ago had not disappeared the way people always said bills eventually did. Because the small apartment she and her younger brother shared in Queens had a landlord who was patient, but not endlessly patient. Life had handed Lucia its weight early, and she had learned to carry it without letting it show on her face. That discipline, that quiet, fierce refusal to crack, was the thing Adrian Romano had noticed first. He had been watching her for longer than he would ever admit to another living person. Not in the way that word sounds when powerful men watch women who work for them. Not like that at all. It had started as something almost involuntary, the way your eye gets pulled towards something that doesn't fit the pattern. Romano's was a restaurant where everyone performed. The guests performed wealth. The staff performed deference. The sommelier performed expertise. Everyone in that building was playing a role. But Lucia Bennett moved through her shift like she had forgotten she was supposed to be performing. He noticed it the first week she started. He had been at his usual corner table, the one no one sat at unless he invited them. The one that gave him a sightline to the entire floor. Watching a table of finance executives order unnecessarily complicated cocktails just to demonstrate that they could. And then he saw her cut across the room to a younger server, a kid named Thomas, who couldn't have been more than 22, who was standing frozen at a table where a guest had just started raising his voice. She didn't run. She walked like she had somewhere specific to be, and she inserted herself into that situation so smoothly that the guest barely noticed the transition from Thomas to Lucia. Whatever she said was too quiet for Adrian to hear. But the guest sat back. He stopped raising his voice. He even laughed at something she said. And Thomas slipped away without humiliation. Adrian had picked up his whiskey and looked back at his papers. But something had shifted. After that, he started noticing all of it. The way she remembered that Mr. Harrington at table 7 had a mild shellfish allergy that wasn't on any official file, but that she had written in her own small notebook. The way she redirected a drunk guest away from another guest's wife without making a scene that would embarrass either party. The way she stayed past the end of her shift one Thursday to help a crying coworker in the back hallway, just sat with her hand on the other woman's shoulder, not saying anything particularly wise, just being there. Adrian had concluded the most genuinely decent person in his restaurant, and that made her both the most ordinary and the most extraordinary person in the building. He had never spoken to her beyond the basic transactions of employer and employee, not because he hadn't wanted to. but because Adrian Romano had spent 38 years building a very specific kind of reputation, and that reputation required a wall between himself and the people who worked for him. It wasn't cruelty. It was survival. In the world he had inherited from his father, a world of alliances and betrayals of men who smiled at your face and moved against you the moment you showed them where you were. Soft attachment was a liability. He had learned that lesson young and learned it hard. So the wall stayed up. And Lucia Bennett stayed on the other side of it. And Adrian told himself that was the correct arrangement. He told himself that every time he found himself watching for her at the start of a dinner service. Every time he noticed almost without meaning to that she wasn't on the floor yet. Every time he felt the room settle into something slightly more tolerable, the moment she walked in and tied her apron and started moving between tables with that particular quiet efficiency that was hers and nobody else's. He told himself he was just observing. That it was managerial awareness. How was, as it turned out, lying to himself. "You're doing it again." Vincent Caruso said it without looking up from the seating arrangement spread across the bar counter. Vincent was Adrian's head of operations, a broad, dark-haired man in his mid-40s who had been with Adrian since the beginning, and who had therefore earned the particular privilege of saying things other men could not say. "Doing what?" Adrian said flatly. "Watching the waitress." The silence that followed had a specific temperature to it. "I'm watching the floor," Adrian said. "I watch the floor every service. That's what I do." "Right." Vincent finally looked up. His expression was carefully neutral in the way that experienced men make their expressions when they are in fact laughing. "The floor, specifically the section of the floor that she's working." "Vincent, I'm just saying, boss. You've walked past her table assignment 4 times in the last 2 hours. You never walk the floor." "I can walk wherever I want in my own restaurant." "Absolutely." Vincent returned to his papers. "No argument there." Adrian set down his glass with more force than was strictly necessary. "She's a good worker," he said. It came out sounding more defensive than he'd intended. "I notice when employees perform well. That's management." "Sure," Vincent said. "That's exactly what it is." Lucia had no idea any of this was happening. That was perhaps the most important thing to understand about her. She was not a woman who moved through the world calculating how she appeared to powerful men. She was not performing anything. She was just working, just surviving, just doing what she had always done, which was keep her head down and handle whatever came at her. Tuesday night, what came at her was Table 12. Table 12 was a party of 6 corporate types, clearly celebrating something already well into a second bottle of wine when Lucia took over from Thomas, who had made the mistake of misquoting the prefix menu. The man at the head of the table was the kind of man who took pleasure in making service staff uncomfortable. Not loudly, subtly. The half-second too long before responding. The slight smile when he sent something back. The way he looked at her name tag like it was an object of mild amusement. "Lucia," he said. "That's Italian, isn't it?" "It is," she said pleasantly. "You Italian?" "Half. On my mother's side." He leaned back like this was a charming piece of trivia. "Funny, working in an Italian restaurant with an Italian name, like something was planned for you." His friends smiled politely at this. One of the women at the table did not smile. She looked at Lucia with a quick apologetic expression that Lucia caught and acknowledged with the tiniest nod. "I'll check on your appetizers," Lucia said. "They should be just a few minutes." She turned away. "Actually," the man said, and his voice had the particular quality of someone who was unaccustomed to being walked away from, "I don't think I want the appetizers anymore. I changed my mind." Lucia turned back, kept her face warm and open. "Of course. Is there something else I can bring you?" "I'm not sure yet. Why don't you wait while I think about it?" It was a small cruelty, designed to put her in a position of visible subordination in front of his tablemates. She knew exactly what he was doing. She had encountered this specific brand of small-minded power play more times than she could count from more men than she cared to remember. She stood and waited. Not anxiously, not visibly annoyed. She just stood there with the patience of someone who had learned that certain things don't last forever, and all you have to do is outlast them. From the corner table, Adrian had seen the whole thing. He had watched the man's face, had read the dynamic in 4 seconds, the way he could read any situation in a room. And he had felt something sharp move through his chest, something that was not quite anger and not quite anything else he had a clean name for. He had gripped the arm of his chair. He did not walk over, because Lucia didn't need him to walk over. He could see that. She had it handled. She was handling it the way she always handled everything, with a composure that would have taken him years and considerable therapy to achieve. But the fact that some man felt entitled to waste her time, to make her stand there like an object waiting to be used, that stayed with him longer than it should have. "I need to ask you something," Thomas said to her later in the back hallway between the kitchen and the storage room, both of them on a 5-minute break that would probably last 3. "Ask," Lucia said. She was pressing the backs of her fingers against the cool stainless steel of the shelving unit. Her feet ached. "How do you do it?" She looked at him. Thomas was 22, recently graduated from some hospitality program in New Jersey, and still in the phase of his working life where he took every rude guest personally. He had the red around the eyes look of someone who had been holding something back for the last 2 hours. "Do what?" she said. "Smile at them. Like actually smile. Not a fake smile. I can tell the difference. You actually look like you're okay with whatever they throw at you." Lucia thought about this for a moment. "I'm not always okay with it," she said. "But being angry at a guest doesn't make the shift go faster, and it doesn't fix anything. So I find something real to hold on to." "Like what?" "Like the fact that I get to go home when this is over. Like the fact that Marcus got a B+ on his midterm last week. Like the fact that I had a genuinely good cup of coffee this morning, and nobody can take that away from me." She half smiled. "Little things. Real things. Things that belong to me regardless of how someone at table 12 decides to behave." Thomas looked at her for a long moment. "How old are you?" he said. 25. He shook his head slowly. "You feel like someone who's about 55. "I'll take it," she said, and pushed off the shelving unit. "Come on, break's over." What Lucia did not know, what she could not have known, was that Adrian Romano had just had a conversation in his office that was going to change the shape of everything. The conversation had been with a man named Damian Reyes. Damian Reyes represented a particular kind of investor that Adrian had been trying to transition away from for the past 2 years. The kind of investor whose money came from sources that did not bear close examination. The kind of relationship that had been useful once and was now becoming a liability. Adrian was in the middle of a slow, careful process of extracting himself from those connections, legitimizing his businesses, one by one, moving his holdings into structures that could survive daylight. And Reyes was one of the last threads he hadn't managed to cut cleanly. The problem was that Reyes knew it. He had sat across from Adrian's desk with the particular comfort of a man who believes he cannot be refused, and he had outlined what he wanted. More involvement in Romano's event hosting, a share of the private dining operations, a presence in the business that would have undone 18 months of careful, expensive work. Adrian had looked at him across the desk and felt the old tension. The one from years ago, when every conversation was a negotiation conducted at the edge of a blade. "I need time to review the structure," he had said, which was not a yes, which Reyes knew was not a yes. Reyes had straightened his jacket and smiled the smile of a man who expects the answer to change. "You've got until the investor event," he said. "I'd like an answer before then." After he left, Adrian had sat for a long time in his empty office. The investor event was in 2 weeks. The biggest gathering he hosted every year, politicians, legitimate businessmen, the kind of people who represented the future he was trying to build. Having Reyes there in any official capacity would send a message he couldn't afford to send. He needed the evening to be flawless. He needed every detail to be exactly right. And somewhere in the long list of things, he started mentally working through something unexpected surfaced. He wanted Lucia on that floor, not as a waitress, as a hostess, as someone guests interacted with, first someone who set the tone. Because he had watched her work for 3 years, and he knew with the absolute certainty he trusted when it came to reading people, that she would hold that room together better than anyone on his payroll. He told himself it was professional judgment. He told himself that's all it was. She was in the middle of a split shift the next afternoon when Marco Vitale, the restaurant's general manager, found her resetting a table. Marco was a short, efficient man who communicated primarily in lists. He had worked for Romano's for 11 years and considered unnecessary conversation a form of waste. "The investor event," he said. "November 14th. Mr. Romano wants you on the hostess rotation." Lucia put down the wine glass she was polishing. "Hostess. Primary hostess. You'd be greeting guests, managing the seating, keeping the room moving." He paused. "It's a formal event. You'd need appropriate attire." "I don't have—" She stopped herself. "What kind of appropriate attire?" "Formal. Elegant." Marco's expression suggested this was not his department. "There's a wardrobe allowance for the event staff. I'll send you the details." He started to leave. "Marco." She heard herself say it before she'd decided to. "Why me? I'm a waitress. There are people on staff who've done this kind of event before." Marco looked at her with the expression of a man who is delivering a message, not an explanation. "Mr. Romano asked for you specifically," he said. "I don't know why. I don't ask those questions." He pulled out his phone. "I'll send you the brief." He walked away. Lucia stood holding the wine glass. Around her, the restaurant prepared for the dinner service. Plates moved. Conversations floated from the kitchen. The familiar sounds of a world she had mastered. "Mr. Romano asked for you specifically." She turned the glass slowly in her hands. She had spoken to Adrian Romano exactly 4 times in 3 years. 2 of them were brief corrections about table settings during his first weeks of observation, clinical, impersonal, over in under 30 seconds. Once he had passed her in this corridor and said, "Good evening," in a tone that suggested it was simply an acknowledgement of her physical presence, not an expression of social warmth. And once 6 months ago, he had stopped near her section and watched her handle a difficult situation, and when it was resolved he had said, "Well done," in a voice so quiet she had almost missed it. That was the full extent of their relationship. She set the glass down on the table. Well done. 2 words, 6 months ago. And now she was the one he'd asked for by name. "Something's going on," said her friend Denise, who worked the bar 3 nights a week and knew everything that happened in Romano's within 12 hours of it happening. They were sitting in a diner 2 blocks from the restaurant at 11:30 at night, splitting an order of fries and decompressing from the shift. Denise was 31, vivid, and had the particular gift of absolute loyalty, combined with an inability to keep information to herself. "Nothing's going on," Lucia said. "He asked for you by name, for the investor event." "Lucia, he doesn't ask for people by name. He barely speaks to people by name. I don't think he knows most of our names." "He knows everyone's name," Lucia said. "He just doesn't use them." Denise paused a fry halfway to her mouth. "How do you know that?" Lucia shrugged. "I've watched him. When new staff starts, he reads the orientation files. All of them. He remembers everything he reads." She picked up her coffee. "He knows all of our names. He just doesn't have conversations with people he doesn't trust." Denise stared at her. "You've been studying him," Denise said. "I've been observant," Lucia said. "There's a difference." "Is there?" Denise put the fry down. "Lucia, sweetheart, tell me something honestly." "No." "You haven't even heard the question." "I know what the question is, and the answer is no." Denise sat back. "Okay, but can I say one thing? You'll say it regardless of what I say." "He asked for you," Denise said simply. "Out of everyone in that building, and you are the only person I have ever watched him pay sustained attention to. Now maybe that means nothing. Maybe it's completely professional. But I am telling you as someone who has watched a lot of powerful men in a lot of expensive restaurants that when a man like Adrian Romano notices a woman like you, that doesn't happen by accident." Lucia looked at her coffee. She did not say anything, because saying nothing was in that moment the most honest response she had. The wardrobe allowance turned out to be a card with a number on it and an address in Midtown. The dress she found after 2 hours in a boutique that sold things Lucia would never have walked into under normal circumstances was deep burgundy, off the shoulder, fitted through the waist, and then moving to a sweep that hit just below the knee. It was elegant without being flashy. It was the kind of thing that did not announce itself loudly, but that once noticed was impossible to ignore. She stood in front of the boutique mirror and felt for a brief and slightly disorienting moment, like someone she had not met before. Not someone better. Not someone more. Just someone else's version of herself. The version that did not smell like kitchen steam and did not have a notebook of table preferences in her apron pocket. The version that existed outside the restaurant. She bought the dress. She did not let herself think too much about why it mattered to her how she looked. The night before the event, she was back on the regular floor, her natural habitat, her comfortable, invisible self. When Adrian Romano walked past table 14, he did it the way he always did things, with purpose, never aimlessly, always going from somewhere specific to somewhere specific. He was on his phone jacket, slightly loosened, which was the only visible indicator that it was the end of a long night. He was 3 feet from her when he looked up from the phone. He stopped. Not entirely. Not in the obvious way. Just half a beat. The kind of stop that only registers if you're watching carefully. "Lucia," he said. She met his eyes. Dark, careful, giving nothing away as always. "Mr. Romano," she said. A pause. 2 seconds. 3. "Tomorrow night," he said. "Marco briefed you on the details." He did. "Good." He held her gaze for a moment longer than strictly necessary. "You'll handle it well." It was not a question. It was a statement. A certainty delivered without performance. She felt something warm and confusing move through her chest. "I'll do my best," she said. He looked at her for one more second. Then he looked away, and the moment collapsed back into the ordinary business of the restaurant. Lucia turned back to table 14. Her hands were perfectly steady. Her heart was doing something she was not going to examine until she was safely home alone, with the lights off. That night in Queens, lying on her narrow bed in an apartment that smelled like the takeout her brother had brought home at 8 o'clock, Lucia stared at the ceiling. Marcus was asleep already. She could hear the quiet that settled over the apartment when he went down, a specific quality of silence that was different from the silence when she was alone. Softer. She had worked so hard for so long that she had almost stopped noticing she was doing it. Survival had a rhythm, and once you found it, you stopped questioning whether you were dancing or just running in place. You just moved. You just kept going. She thought about Adrian Romano's eyes when he had said, "You'll handle it well." She thought about the way he had stopped. That half-beat. She thought about Denise's voice when a man like Adrian Romano notices a woman like you that doesn't happen by accident. Lucia pressed her fingers to her sternum. There was a fear there. Not of him exactly. Not of the man, though she was not naive about what kind of world he moved in, what kind of name his was in certain conversations. It was a different kind of fear. The kind that arrives when something you have been telling yourself doesn't exist, starts becoming impossible to deny. She was not invisible to him. She had never been invisible to him. And she had been telling herself for 3 years that invisibility was protection. That if she kept her head down and did her work and stayed on the right side of the line that separated employee from person of consequence, she would be safe. Safe from hope. Safe from expectations that could not be met. Safe from wanting something that the reality of her life did not have room for. But he had asked for her by name, and tomorrow night she was going to walk into a room full of powerful people wearing a dress the color of dark wine. And for reasons she was not ready to say out loud, that fact filled her with a terror and a longing that were so tangled together she could barely tell them apart. She closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow is tomorrow. Sleep. She did not sleep much. By the time morning came, and Marcus wandered into the kitchen, looking for coffee, and asked her why she looked like she'd been arguing with herself all night, she had made a decision. Not about Adrian Romano. Not about what any of it meant or didn't mean. Just a simpler decision. She was going to walk into that room and do her job as well as she had always done it. She was going to be exactly who she was. Not a performance. Not a version of herself designed to fit a dress or impress a room, or prove something to a powerful man who had noticed her. Just herself. That was the only thing she had ever had, and it had carried her this far. She poured coffee into her brother's mug. "I'm working a special event tonight," she said. "Yeah." He wrapped both hands around the mug. He was 20, lanky, perpetually underdressed for the weather. He looked up at her with their mother's eyes. "Fancy?" "Fancy," she confirmed. He grinned at her, the big, uncomplicated grin that she would spend the rest of her life being grateful for, the grin that made everything seem survivable. "You're gonna be the best person in the room," he said simply. "The way you say things when you mean them without reservation." Lucia pressed her hand briefly against the top of his head, the way she'd done since he was 11 and she was 16, and everything had changed. "Drink your coffee," she said. But she was smiling when she turned away. Because somewhere under all the fear and the complication, and the 3 years of careful invisibility, she suspected he might be right. The burgundy dress hung on the back of her closet door. 14 hours from now, Lucia Bennett would walk into Adrian Romano's world, not as the waitress nobody noticed, as herself. And Adrian Romano was not ready for what that would do to him. The dress was hanging exactly where she had left it. Lucia stood in front of it for 30 seconds without moving. Then she took it off the hanger, laid it carefully across the bed, and went to make coffee, because she needed something to do with her hands before the night started dismantling whatever composure she had managed to hold together. Marcus had already left for class. The apartment was quiet in the particular way it got when she was alone in it, functional, honest nothing, performing anything for anyone. The coffee maker gurgled. The radiator knocked twice against the wall. Outside, Queens moved through an ordinary Thursday morning with no awareness that anything unusual was happening in Lucia Bennett's life. She drank her coffee standing at the kitchen counter. She thought about the room she was about to walk into. 200 people minimum. The kind of people who wore their net worth like a second skin, comfortable with it in a way that took either generations of money or a complete reorganization of values to achieve. Politicians whose names appeared in newspaper headlines. Businessmen whose handshakes rearranged industries. And Adrian Romano at the center of all of it, the way he was always at the center of everything in his world, still and watchful and giving away nothing. She had handled difficult rooms before. She told herself this was just another difficult room. She almost believed it. She arrived at Romano's at 5:30, 2 hours before the event began. The restaurant had been transformed in the way that only serious money and serious preparation can transform a space. She felt it before she saw it, a change in the quality of attention in the building. A collective drawing in of breath that happens when people know something significant is coming. Staff moved with the precise urgency of people who understand the stakes. The kitchen had been running since noon. Security personnel she had never seen before were stationed at intervals that suggested someone had mapped the floor plan with specific concerns in mind. Marco met her at the staff entrance with a clipboard and the expression of a man running on espresso and professional obligation. "You're early," he said, which from Marco was the highest available compliment. "I wanted time to walk the room before guests arrived," she said. He looked at her, really looked at her, which was not something Marco typically did, and something shifted briefly in his efficient, list-driven eyes. "Good thinking," he said. "Come on, I'll brief you on the seating structure." She followed him toward the main floor, already running through the details in her mind. Names, faces from the files Marco had sent. Table assignments. The specific diplomatic geography of who got seated near whom, and who under absolutely no circumstances could be allowed to interact with whom, until the third drink had smoothed out whatever friction existed between them. She had studied the guest list the way she studied everything, with the careful, retentive attention of someone who understood that preparation was the only real protection. She was so focused on running through the names that she almost didn't notice Adrian Romano standing at the entrance to the main floor. He noticed her. She could feel it before she turned, the specific quality of stillness that settled in a room when he was paying close attention to something. She had learned to recognize it over 3 years, the way you learn to recognize weather changes before the sky shows them. She turned. Howe was standing with 2 men she didn't recognize, and all three of them had been in the middle of a conversation. Past tense. Because when she turned, the conversation had stopped. One of the men was still talking. His mouth was still moving, but Adrian was not listening to him anymore. He was looking at her. And Lucia understood in a sudden, completely unwelcome flash of clarity that she had miscalculated. She had told herself this was just a job. Just another night. Just Lucia Bennett doing what she always did, which was handle whatever the room required of her. She had not adequately prepared for the possibility that Adrian Romano, seeing her out of uniform for the first time in 3 years, would look at her like that. Like she had just walked through a door he hadn't known existed. She held his gaze for exactly 2 seconds. Then she looked at Marco and said, "Walk me through the seating chart," in a voice that came out completely steady. She was proud of herself for that. The next hour was logistics. She was grateful for the logistics. The logistics gave her something to do that was concrete and knowable, and had nothing to do with the way Adrian Romano's expression had shifted when he saw her. She walked the room with Marco, committed the floor plan to memory, introduced herself to the 2 other hostesses who would be working alongside her. Clara, who was experienced and kind, and a young woman named Simone, who was clearly terrified and needed a few minutes of quiet reassurance before she would be functional. "You're going to be fine," Lucia told her in the back corridor, both of them with 10 minutes to go. "You know the room, you know your section. If anything goes sideways, find me. Don't try to handle a problem alone, that's not weakness, that's just efficiency." Simone nodded, pressing her hands flat against her thighs. "What if someone asks me something I don't know?" she said. "You say, 'Let me find out for you right now,' and then you find out. There's no shame in not knowing something. There's only shame in pretending you know it and being wrong." Lucia straightened the collar of Simone's jacket. "Go, you're ready." Simone went. Lucia stood alone in the corridor for exactly 30 seconds. She pressed her fingertips against the wall. She breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth. She thought about Marcus and his grin, and "You're going to be the best person in the room." Then she walked out to greet the first guests. The room filled quickly. That was the thing about powerful people. They arrived with a kind of gravitational force, each person pulling their own atmosphere with them, and when you got 200 of them in one space, it created something that was almost physical. A pressure in the air. An electricity that was not entirely comfortable, but that was absolutely undeniable. Lucia moved through it like she had been doing this her whole life. She didn't perform confidence. She just was herself, careful, warm, precise, the version of herself that she had been building since she was 16 years old, and life had handed her responsibility before she was ready for it. She remembered names. She guided people to their seats with the kind of attention that made them feel individually considered rather than processed. She laughed at the right moments, genuinely, not performatively, because she was not capable of fake laughter and had never tried to be. A senator's wife told her she had the most calming presence she'd encountered all year. A tech billionaire shook her hand and said, "I hope you're not wasted in hospitality." She smiled at that and did not explain that hospitality was in fact one of the most demanding professional environments a person could work in, requiring a specific combination of emotional intelligence, physical endurance, logistical precision, and social fluency that most corporate careers never came close to demanding. She just said, "It's a remarkable industry," and moved on to the next guest. She was so absorbed in the work that she forgot for 20 full minutes that Adrian Romano was in the room. And then she heard his voice, not close. Across the floor in the direction of the bar, low and controlled the way it always was. She didn't catch the words. She didn't need to. She knew his voice the way you know a sound you've heard every working day for 3 years. It had become part of the ambient texture of her professional life, as recognizable as the sound of the kitchen pass or the soft clink of crystal glasses being set. She did not look toward him. She kept moving. Vincent Caruso was having, by his own internal assessment, a deeply informative evening. He had been watching Adrian since the guests started arriving, because watching Adrian was part of his job, and also because Vincent had known him for long enough to understand that the tells were small, but they were there. The almost imperceptible tightening around the jaw when something irritated him. The way his right hand moved to the side of his jacket when he was calculating. the precise quality of stillness that settled over him when he was trying not to react to something. That last one had been in continuous operation for the past 40 minutes. Since Lucia Bennett had walked into the room, Vincent had watched Adrian clock her the moment she appeared, had watched the conversation he was in stall. Mid-sentence had watched his boss's eyes track across the room and find her with the kind of automatic precision that a man develops only when he's been paying attention to someone for a very long time. And now Adrian was standing near the bar having what appeared to be a perfectly normal conversation with a state senator. And Vincent could see the micro-adjustments, the slight angle of the shoulder, the positioning of the body that kept Lucia in his peripheral vision, regardless of where she moved in the room. "You're going to pull a muscle," Vincent said pleasantly, appearing at his elbow. Adrian didn't flinch. "What do you need, Vincent?" "Nothing, just making an observation. Keep it." "You've recalibrated your position 6 times in the last 20 minutes to maintain a sight line." The senator, fortunately, had moved off to greet someone. Adrian turned to look at Vincent with an expression that would have silenced most people on Earth. Vincent was not most people. "She's doing an excellent job," Adrian said. "Precisely, carefully. She's doing a spectacular job," Vincent agreed. "Which is not surprising, because she's been doing a spectacular job for 3 years, and you've been watching her do it for 3 years. What is interesting is the way you're watching her tonight." "Vincent." "Different dress," Vincent said simply. "Same woman. But you look at her differently tonight, and I'm curious about that." A pause. "Drop it," Adrian said. His voice had an edge that was not quite anger. It was something closer to a man warning himself rather than warning someone else. Vincent nodded slowly and picked up his drink. "Damian Reyes arrived 10 minutes ago," he said, professionally transitioning. "Table 9. He's already working the room." The edge shifted, became something colder and more familiar. "I know," Adrian said. "I saw him." "He's been watching her too," Vincent said. "Lucia," since she greeted him at the door. The silence that followed had a specific weight. "Tell Marco to put Clara on table 9's section," Adrian said. "Reassign Lucia to the east side of the room." Vincent raised an eyebrow very slightly. "To keep her away from Reyes." "To optimize the floor management," Adrian said flatly. "The east side has the investors I need to close. I want my best people there." "Right," Vincent said. "That's the reason." "Completely understood," Vincent said, and walked away before his expression gave him away entirely. Lucia noticed the reassignment when Marco appeared at her elbow and redirected her toward the east section without particular explanation. She didn't ask. In her experience, events of this scale operated on a logic that wasn't always visible from the floor, and the fastest way to be useful was to accept the adjustment and execute it well. She moved to the east side and immediately understood why it mattered. These were the guests Adrian was investing real attention in. She could read it in the way he positioned himself, the way Vincent circulated nearby, the quality of focus that the entire evening seemed to be built around. A group of venture capitalists who were apparently in the process of deciding whether to align with Romano's legitimate business interests. A former cabinet secretary whose presence lent a particular kind of credibility to the whole enterprise. A woman named Diane Rourke, who Lucia recognized from Marco's briefing as someone whose endorsement in certain financial circles was worth more than most people in the room combined. Lucia worked that section with everything she had. She remembered that Diane Rourke's assistant had noted a preference for still water over sparkling. She ensured it appeared without Rourke having to ask. She positioned conversations, introduced guests to each other, with the kind of specific, thoughtful framing that made people immediately feel the introduction was doing something for them. She managed the temperature of the room, not the literal temperature, but the social one, keeping things warm and moving and productive without ever making anyone feel managed. She was so deep in the work that she almost missed the moment Damian Reyes crossed the room toward her. Almost. He was in his mid-50s, well-built in the way of men who spend money on both fitness and tailoring, with the kind of face that had probably been handsome 20 years ago and had since settled into a more complicated territory. He moved through the room with the easy confidence of someone who had never seriously considered the possibility that he wasn't welcome somewhere. "You're remarkable," he said. Just like that. No preamble. The way a man speaks when he's used to having openings without earning them. Lucia looked at him with the same open professional warmth she had given every guest all evening. "Thank you," she said. "Can I help you find your seat or get you something from the bar?" "I'm right where I want to be," he said. His smile was practiced. "Damian Reyes." "I know," she said pleasantly. "You're at table 9. I believe they're about to serve the first course." "I'm not particularly hungry." He tilted his head slightly. "What's your name?" "Lucia." "Lucia." He said it like he was tasting it. "How long have you worked for Romano?" 3 years. 3 years. Something shifted in his expression, a calculation she could see without being able to fully read. "He's a lucky man, to have someone like you representing his interests." There was a texture to the way he said it that was slightly off. Not overtly wrong, just off, like a note that's almost in tune. "I'll let the kitchen know you're ready when you'd like," she said smoothly, starting to redirect. "Does he know?" "No," Reyes said. She paused. "Know what?" she said. "How good you are." His eyes moved over her in a way that was technically within the boundaries of acceptable, but that made something at the back of her neck tighten. Men like Romano, they're not always aware of what they have until someone else points it out to them. Lucia looked at him for one measured second. "Enjoy your evening, Mr. Reyes," she said and turned away. Her hands were still. Her face was still. Her posture was perfect. But something cold had moved through her at the phrase "men like Romano" and the specific quality of his attention and the calculation she had seen flash behind his eyes when she confirmed she had worked there for 3 years. She filed it away. She kept moving. From across the room, Adrian had watched the entire exchange. He had watched it with the particular precise attention of a man who reads situations for a living, who has survived in a world where missing a detail can cost you everything. He had watched Reyes cross the room. Had watched the body language, the positioning, the practiced ease of the approach. Had seen Lucia's response, professional, composed, impossible to fault. Had seen Reyes's expression as she walked away. And he had seen the exact moment Reyes looked from Lucia to him. Across a room full of 200 people, Reyes had looked directly at Adrian Romano and smiled. It was the smile of a man delivering a message. The message was, "I see what you're protecting, and I know it matters to you, and that means I already have something to work with." Adrian set his glass down on the nearest surface. Every instinct he had, the ones sharpened over 15 years, in a world that operated on leverage, told him the same thing simultaneously. Reyes had come tonight, not for the investment conversations, not for the networking. He had come to map Adrian's vulnerabilities, to find the thing that Adrian valued enough to protect. And in 30 seconds, he had found it. The problem was that Lucia had no idea. The second problem was that the reason Reyes had found her so quickly was that Adrian himself had not been as careful as he thought he had. "You've recalibrated your position 6 times in the last 20 minutes to maintain a sightline." He closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then he opened them and went to find Vincent. "I need her out of Reyes's orbit for the rest of the evening." He said, his voice low, his back to the room. Quietly. No disruption. Vincent was already nodding. "I saw it. He's not here for business. I know what he's here for." Vincent's voice had dropped to the flat professional register they used when things got serious. "I already made 2 of his people. They came in with the catering staff. They've been watching the room all night." Adrian went very still. "How many?" 3 that I can confirm. 1 more I'm not certain of." A pause. "They're not armed. It's an information operation, not a security threat. Not tonight." "Tonight," Adrian said, "is about information. What do you want to do?" Adrian looked across the room. Lucia was introducing Diane Rourke to one of the venture capitalists, and whatever she was saying had made both of them laugh, a real laugh, not a polite one. Rourke was leaning forward, slightly engaged, interested. Lucia had done in 4 minutes what Adrian's team had been trying to engineer for 6 weeks. He watched her for 3 seconds. Then he made the decision. Nothing changes on the surface, he said. The evening continues exactly as planned. We give Reyes nothing. No reaction. No adjustment he can read. He looked at Vincent. But after this event is over, I'm calling Marchetti. We accelerate the timeline on the restructure. Reyes doesn't get another opportunity like this. Vincent nodded slowly. And Lucia? Adrian was quiet for a moment. She doesn't know, he said. And she stays that way. This isn't her world. Adrian. Vincent said it carefully. The way he said things when he was about to say something Adrian didn't want to hear. She's already in it. The moment Reyes looked at her and looked at you, she became relevant to him. You understand that? The silence between them had weight. I know, Adrian said. He picked up his glass. He walked back into the room. The dinner portion of the evening was when everything shifted. Lucia could feel it, that specific change in the quality of the night that happens when an event moves from the social performative phase into the more intimate seated phase. The room reorganized itself. Conversations deepened. Defenses lowered slightly the way they always do over food and wine. The lighting had been adjusted almost imperceptibly toward something warmer. She circulated along the edges available, but not intrusive. This was the part of the evening that required a different kind of skill. Less active management, more reading of the room. Knowing when a table needed something before they asked. Knowing when to appear and when to stay invisible. The old skill. Her natural habitat, except that she could not be entirely invisible tonight in this dress in this room, and she was beginning to understand that this was for better or worse, a permanent change. Something had shifted in the way people saw her. She could feel it in the quality of the eye contact. In the way conversations paused when she approached, rather than continuing around her the way they did when she was in her uniform. She was not background anymore. She was not sure how she felt about that. She was very sure that she was not going to spend the evening thinking about it. She turned from a table she had just attended to and found Adrian Romano standing 4 feet away. Not moving. Just standing. Looking at her. The room was full of people, and none of them existed for the 6 seconds that followed. Walk with me a moment, he said. It wasn't quite a request, and it wasn't quite an order. It was just a sentence said quietly, with the certainty of a man who is used to people walking with him when he asks. She walked with him. He led her to the edge of the room, not into a corridor, not away from the public space, just to a quieter margin, where the noise of the dinner dropped to something manageable. He stood with his back half turned to the room. She stood facing him. Reyes spoke to you, he said. Yes. What did he say? She told him. Briefly, accurately, without editorializing. 3 sentences. Adrian listened without interrupting. His face gave away nothing which she had learned years ago was not blankness, it was control. There was a difference. If he approaches you again tonight, Adrian said, you tell me. All right, she said. Then, because she had never been very good at leaving questions unasked when she needed the answers. Is there something I should know about him? A pause. Very brief. The kind of pause that has content in it. Not tonight, he said. Which was not a no. She noticed that. It was not a no, which meant there was something, and the something was not for tonight, which meant there would be a different night where it became relevant. She filed that away too. Lucia. He said her name in a way that made her pay attention, not louder, not softer, just differently. Like it meant something specific to say it in this moment. You're doing... He stopped. Started again. The room is working tonight because of how you're working it. You should know that. She looked at him. Thank you, she said. He held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then he nodded once, that single precise nod that seemed to be his version of saying several things at once, and he walked back into the room. Lucia stood at the edge of the floor. Her heart was doing the thing again. She pressed the heel of her hand briefly against her sternum, took a breath, and went back to work. It was Diane Rourke who broke the evening open. At 9:45, between the main course and dessert, Rourke found Lucia near the East Bar and said in the direct, unhurried tone of a woman who had spent 60 years saying exactly what she meant, "You're the most competent person in this room tonight." Lucia looked at her. You included the word tonight, Lucia said. Most nights too, or just tonight? Rourke laughed a short, genuine bark of surprise that was completely undignified and utterly charming. I like you, she said. I was supposed to be meeting with Adrian Romano's investment team this quarter. I've been resistant. But if this... She gestured vaguely at the room, meaning the entire evening, the tone of it, the quality of the experience. If this is the caliber of how he operates, I may reconsider. Lucia thought of what to say. He has very high standards, she said carefully, for the people he trusts, and he's very careful about trust. She paused. I think that's worth something. Rourke studied her with sharp, experienced eyes. You've worked for him 3 years, she said. It was not a question she had done her reading. Yes. And you trust him? Lucia held the question for one honest second. I trust his integrity, she said. Within what he does. Rourke was quiet for a moment. That's a very precise answer, she said. It's the honest one, Lucia said. Rourke looked at her for another long moment. Then she picked up her wine glass. Send him my regards, she said. Tell him we should talk. She moved away. Lucia stood still for just a moment, absorbing what had just happened. Then she went to find Marco to relay the message because some things were above her pay grade, and this was very clearly one of them. She found Adrian first. How was near the entrance, finishing a conversation, and when she appeared at the edge of his peripheral vision. He closed the conversation with the focused efficiency of a man who has just identified a priority. Rourke, she said simply when he reached her. She said to send her regards. She wants to talk. Something moved through Adrian's face. Not surprise, he had the kind of control that made surprise rare, but something deeper. Something that looked almost like relief. She said that directly, he said. Her exact words. He looked at her for a moment. What did you say to her? The truth, Lucia said. About what I think your integrity is worth. The silence between them had a quality she had not experienced before. Not the careful professional distance of the past 3 years. Something else. Something that was aware of itself. That conversation, he said slowly, may have just changed the course of the next 2 years of my business. Then you're welcome, she said. It came out before she'd decided to say it. She felt the edge of it, the slight boldness, the departure from the careful professional tone she normally maintained with him. He looked at her. And then, quietly, unexpectedly, in a way she had never witnessed in 3 years of watching him, he smiled. Not the controlled social performance of a man making a gesture. A real one. Brief. Almost involuntary. The kind of smile that escapes before a person can decide whether to let it out. It transformed his face entirely. She felt it go through her like something physical. Yes, he said. Thank you. The smile had gone by the time the second word landed, controlled again, reined back in. But it had been there. She had seen it. He turned back toward the room. Lucia stood where she was. 3 years. 3 years, and she had never seen that. The real version. The one underneath all the control and the reputation and the careful, impenetrable surface. She had seen it for 2 seconds. And it was the most dangerous thing that had happened to her all evening. The event wound down past 11. Guests began moving toward the exits in the slow, unhurried way of people who have been comfortable and don't particularly want to stop being comfortable. Lucia supervised the transition with Clara and Simone, managing departures, the way she managed everything smoothly, individually, making each guest feel specifically attended to rather than efficiently processed. Damian Reyes left without approaching her again. As he walked past the main entrance, she noticed he stopped to say something to one of the security staff, a man she now recognized from the quality of his stillness as one of Adrian's people rather than the building's general staff. The exchange was brief. Whatever was said, neither face gave anything away. Reyes walked out. The door closed behind him. Lucia kept moving. At 11:45, when the last guest had gone and the staff had moved into cleanup mode, she found herself in the back hallway, pressing her shoulders against the cool wall and taking the first completely unguarded breath she had taken in 6 hours. Her feet ached in a way that was specific to high heels, which was a different and considerably less forgiving ache than the one she usually carried from her regular shifts. Her cheeks had the slight soreness of a night spent smiling genuinely but continuously. She felt the way she always felt at the end of a long, difficult thing, wrung out and quietly satisfied. "You're still here." She turned. Adrian Romano was standing at the far end of the corridor. Jacket off the way she had never seen him during a service. Sleeves rolled to the forearm. He looked, and this was the only word she had for it, human in a way that he didn't usually permit himself to look in professional space. "I was about to clock out," she said. "Walk outside with me for a moment," he said. "I need air." She looked at him. "Okay," she said. They walked to the side exit that opened onto a quiet stretch of pavement that ran along the building's east wall. The city did what the city always did. It breathed and hummed and continued its enormous, indifferent business around them. He stood with his hands in his pockets looking at the middle distance. "Rourke confirmed," he said. "She's agreed to a meeting." "Good," Lucia said. "More than good." A pause. "That relationship represents everything I've been trying to build for 2 years. The legitimate side. The part that can survive daylight." She listened. She wasn't sure why he was telling her this. She wasn't going to ask. "I was watching you tonight," he said. The sentence landed differently than the professional context should have made it land. She waited. "Not in the way of—" He stopped. Adjusted. "I was watching because you were running my floor in a way I've never seen it run. And I want you to understand that I'm aware of what you did tonight. Not just the Rourke conversation, all of it. Every decision you made." "I was just doing the job," she said. "No," he said. "You were doing something that can't be taught and can't be manufactured. You were being exactly who you are in a room that rewards performance. And the reason it worked is because you weren't performing." Lucia was quiet. "Why did you ask for me for tonight?" she said. "Specifically, by name, when you have people with more event experience." He was quiet for a moment that stretched past comfortable. "Because," he said, and she heard something careful in it, something being navigated in real time. "I knew you would hold the room together better than anyone else I had, and I was right." She looked at him. That wasn't the whole answer. She could hear the rest of it, the part he hadn't said in the gap between the sentence and the silence that followed it. "Mr. Romano," she said. "Adrian," he said. "You've worked for me for 3 years. You can call me Adrian." She absorbed that. "Adrian," she said, and his name in her voice did something to the space between them that she was not entirely prepared for. "You know that I'm still just your waitress." "I know what your job title is," he said. "That's not what I see when I look at you." The silence after that was complete. Lucia held it. Held herself steady inside it. Because this was the moment she had been half afraid of and half waiting for, since Marco had said he asked for you specifically. And now it was here, and she needed to handle it with the same honesty she had given to everything else tonight. "I don't know what to do with that," she said finally. "I want to tell you that, not to push you away, but because it's the truth." He looked at her. "I know," he said. "Neither do I." The city breathed around them. Somewhere a block away, a car horn sounded brief and ordinary. The light from the street caught the side of his face, and he looked for just a moment like a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had just admitted for the first time that it had weight. "Go home, Lucia," he said. Not unkindly, not dismissively, with a gentleness that she had not heard in his voice before, and that she would think about quietly for the rest of the week. She went home, but she carried the sound of his voice saying her name. Just her name, nothing before or after it all the way to Queens. And for once, she didn't try to put it down. She did not hear from him for 4 days. 4 days of regular shifts, regular uniform, regular invisibility. Plates moving tables, turning the comfortable rhythm of a life she understood completely. Thomas asked her how the event went, and she said fine, it went fine. Denise asked her with her eyes, and Lucia shook her head slightly, and Denise, for once in her life, let it go. The dress hung back on the door of her closet. She didn't move it. She wasn't sure why. On the fifth day, Marco told her she had been assigned to the private dining room for a Thursday lunch. Small party 6, covers high-end. Her normal shift just relocated. She said fine and showed up at 11:30 and was arranging the table settings when the door opened. Adrian walked in alone. He stopped when he saw her. Not dramatically, just that half-beat she had learned to read. "I requested you for this service," he said, by way of explanation, unapologetically. Lucia set down the water glass she was holding, carefully. "There's no party," she said. It wasn't a question. "No." She looked at him. "You booked the private room to talk to me." "I booked the private room because it's the only space in this building where I can have a conversation without 12 people watching it happen." He moved to the table, pulled out a chair, not to sit, just touching it, the restless gesture of a man who is not accustomed to not knowing what to do with his hands. "I can leave if you'd prefer." "I didn't say that," she said. He sat down. After a moment, she sat across from him. The silence lasted about 10 seconds. That was a long time in a quiet room between two people who both had things to say, and neither one was ready to say first. Adrian spoke. "I want to apologize," he said, "for the other night. Outside. What I said the way I said it. It wasn't fair to you." Lucia waited. "You work for me," he said, "and I said something personal in a professional space after a long night and put you in a position that wasn't appropriate. That was on me." She looked at him. He was giving her a way out. She could see it, the carefully constructed apology that was also, if she chose to use it that way, a door back to the previous arrangement. Professional distance. Manageable clarity. The comfort of the line between employer and employee that had held for 3 years. She could walk through that door and everything went back to what it was. She didn't walk through it. "Is that what you actually wanted to say to me?" she said. A pause. "No," he said. "Then say what you actually want to say." He looked at her for a long moment. Whatever it cost him to be in this room in this conversation was visible in the specific quality of his stillness, the kind that happens when a man has been controlled for so long that choosing not to be feels like stepping off a ledge. "I noticed you," he said, "the first week you started here, and I have been noticing you every shift since then, and I have been telling myself it was professional observation, and I was wrong. I was wrong about that for a long time." She held very still. "The other night, seeing you in that room, watching you work, watching how people responded to you." He stopped, pressed his hands flat on the table. "You walked in, and something in that room changed. Not because of the dress, not because of how you looked, though." Another stop. "Because it was you. Without the uniform. Without the performance of staying invisible. Just you exactly as you are. And I realized I had been keeping myself from saying something true for 3 years, and I was tired of it." Lucia breathed. "I am not someone who says things like this easily," he said. "I don't trust people. I don't do this. Whatever this is. I am aware that I'm sitting in my own restaurant asking an employee to listen to me talk about my feelings like I'm a different kind of man than I am." "Maybe you are," she said. He looked at her. "A different kind of man," she said, "than the one people think you are." The silence after that had a completely different texture than the one before. "Can I say something now?" she said. "Yes. I've watched you for 3 years too," she said. "Not the same way I wasn't watching you the way you were watching me. But I was watching. Because you're impossible not to watch, and I was trying to understand something about you." She paused, choosing words with the care she brought to everything. "I saw how you ran this place. Not the business, the people. How you dealt with the staff when things went wrong. How you handled problems. I watched you read a room full of powerful men who were all performing for each other, and I watched you be the only person in it who wasn't." I was very still. "You're not what you look like from the outside," she said. "I know that. I've known that for a long time." She looked at her hands on the table. "But knowing that someone is different on the inside than they appear doesn't mean it's simple to—" She searched for the word. "To step toward that, especially when the outside is what yours is." "My world," he said, flat, clear, not defensive. "Your world," she confirmed. He nodded slowly. He didn't argue it. I'm in the middle of changing it, he said. The restructure, what Rourke represents, what the investor event was about. I'm not asking you to take that on faith. I know what my name means in certain circles, and I know that's real. I'm not pretending it isn't. He met her eyes directly. But I want you to know that the direction I'm moving in is away from it. Not overnight. Not cleanly, but genuinely. Why? She said. The question landed. Because, he said, and something in his voice shifted, not softer exactly, but more honest than she had ever heard him. I got to a place where I looked at everything I had built, and none of it felt like mine. None of it was something I had chosen. It was something I had inherited and survived and maintained, and I was very good at maintaining it, and none of it made me feel anything real. A pause. And then I hired a waitress who treated a 22-year-old kid with more basic human dignity than I had shown most people in a decade, and something... He stopped. What? She said quietly. Something cracked, he said. Not broke. Cracked. Like there was a version of a life I had written off as unavailable to me, and suddenly it wasn't entirely written off anymore. The room was so quiet, she could hear both of them breathing. That was 3 years ago, she said. Yes. You watched me for 3 years and didn't say a word. Yes. Why now? She said. He looked at her steadily. Because Reyes looked at you across that room, and then looked at me, and I understood that I had been obvious enough that a man who makes his living reading vulnerabilities had read mine in 30 seconds. Which meant I had been lying to myself about how invisible what I felt was. His jaw tightened briefly. And I decided I'd rather be honest with you than have someone else define what this is. Lucia sat with that. It was, she thought, one of the most complicated things anyone had ever said to her. And one of the most honest. I need to tell you something too, she said. Tell me. I'm not someone who needs saving. She said it directly without apology. I know what my life looks like from the outside. The debts, the double shifts taking care of Marcus. I know that to someone with resources that situation looks like a problem that can be solved with money. And I want you to understand, if that's part of this, if any part of what you feel is about wanting to fix something, then it's not the right foundation. Because I'm not broken. I'm just working. He looked at her without flinching. I know you're not broken, he said. I've watched you for 3 years. You're the least broken person I've ever met. She absorbed that. Then what is it? She said. What do you actually want here? Because I need to understand what you're asking before I can tell you whether it's possible. He was quiet for a moment. Not avoiding the question, she could see him actually sitting in it, giving it the weight it deserved. I want to know you, he said. Not in a professional capacity. Not managed, not contained. I want to have a conversation with you that has nothing to do with the floor or the service or who's at what table. I want to find out who you are outside of this building. He paused. And I want to have the chance to show you who I am outside of it. Lucia looked at the man across the table from her. 38 years old. One of the most feared names in certain rooms in this city. More controlled than anyone she had ever met. And more genuinely human underneath that control than almost anyone she had ever met. Watching her across a crowded room for 3 years without saying a single word about it. Sitting now in his own restaurant with his hands flat on the table, like he was trying to hold himself steady. She thought about the fear she'd felt in her apartment 4 nights ago. The burgundy dress on the door. The city breathing outside her window. She thought about what she'd told Thomas in the back hallway. I find something real to hold on to. She thought about how this man, this complicated, controlled, dangerous, genuine man, had cracked something in her too. Without meaning to. Without asking for it. One conversation, she said. He waited. Outside this building, she said. No professional context. No waitress, no boss. Just people. Something moved through his expression that she had no word for except relief. Yes, he said. That's all I'm asking for. And Adrian. She looked at him directly. If at any point what I see doesn't match what you've told me today, I walk. I don't care who you are. I don't stay in situations that aren't honest. I would not expect you to, he said. She nodded once. She stood up because the private dining room was still a professional space, and she was still on shift, and some lines held, even when others were shifting. "I'll finish setting this table," she said, "and then I'll go back to my regular section." He stood too. Of course. She picked up the water glass, set it in its proper place. "Saturday," he said, "if you're free." She was not going to pretend she wasn't. She had spent 3 years being honest in this building, and she wasn't going to start performing now. "I'm free Saturday," she said. He nodded, moved toward the door. "Adrian?" He stopped. "What you said about the crack, about the version of a life you'd written off." She met his eyes. "I understand that. More than you'd think." He looked at her. "I think I would," he said quietly, "if you let me." He walked out. Lucia stood alone in the private dining room. Her hands were completely steady. Her heart was a different matter entirely. Vincent found out about the Saturday arrangement, in the way Vincent found out about everything, which was that he was paying attention while other people thought he was doing something else. He said nothing to Adrian directly. Instead, he appeared at Adrian's office door at the end of Thursday and said with the air of a man discussing logistics, "You know Reyes made 3 calls after he left Tuesday night." Adrian looked up from his desk. "To whom?" "First call, 45 seconds, his driver. Second call, 6 minutes. We're still working on the recipient, but the tower trace puts it in the Bronx. Third call, 11 minutes, to a lawyer named Grieco, who does not to anyone's knowledge do anything that resembles legitimate legal work." Vincent paused. "He's building something." "He's been building something for 2 months, Adrian said. "This accelerates the timeline." "What's the timeline for Marchetti?" "I called him Wednesday morning. The restructure documents are drafted. I need 2 signatures and a board approval that should take 3 weeks. He leaned back. 3 weeks is too long. "I'll call Marcus Rinaldi," Vincent said. "He can move the board meeting up." Adrian nodded. Vincent didn't move. "What else?" Adrian said. "Reyes's man, the one who came in with catering on Tuesday, I had a conversation with him this morning." Vincent's tone was perfectly even, which was how Adrian knew it was not perfectly even. He asked about staffing, specifically about how long certain people had been with the organization. The silence that followed was 3 seconds long. "He asked about Lucia," Adrian said. Not a question. "He asked about the primary hostess from the event. Yes, I gave him nothing. But the fact that he's asking means Reyes flagged her specifically." Vincent looked at him. "Adrian, she's a civilian. She has no involvement in any of this. But if Reyes has decided she's a useful pressure point..." "She won't be," Adrian said. His voice had the flat, absolute quality that ended conversations. "You can't guarantee that unless you..." "I will handle Reyes," Adrian said, "before Saturday." Vincent paused. "Saturday," he said, and there was something careful in the way he said it, something that was not quite a question. "Yes," Adrian said. "Saturday." Vincent looked at him for one long moment. Then he straightened, nodded, and walked out. Adrian turned back to his desk. The files on Reyes were spread across it, 18 months of careful documentation. Financial structures, relationships, mapped in his own handwriting in the private notebook he kept in the locked drawer. He had been methodical about this. Patient. Building the exit from Reyes. The way you build any exit from a dangerous place. Slowly, quietly making sure every foothold was solid before you moved your weight onto it. Reyes asking about Lucia changed the calculation, because patient and slow were luxuries you could afford when the only thing at risk was your own position. He closed the files. He picked up his phone and called Marchetti directly. Saturday arrived with the particular quality of October mornings in New York, cold and bright and completely indifferent to whatever any individual was feeling about it. Lucia met him at a coffee shop in the West Village. That was, she was fairly confident, not a place that appeared in any professional context connected to Adrian Romano. A small, genuinely unglamorous place with mismatched chairs and a rotating cast of neighborhood regulars and coffee that was excellent without making any fuss about being excellent. She was there first, which was deliberate. She had wanted to be seated, settled herself before he arrived. She had wanted to be on her own ground. He walked in at exactly the time he'd said he would. He was wearing a dark jacket, no tie, and he looked different in daylight and in civilian clothes, less armored. Not vulnerable exactly, just present in a way that the professional setting always filtered. He saw her and came directly to the table and sat down. "You were early," he said. "I'm always early," she said. "So am I." He looked around the coffee shop with the brief automatic read of a man who assesses rooms as a matter of reflex. Then he looked back at her. "Good choice." "I know this neighborhood," she said. "I grew up 3 stops from here." Something shifted in his expression. Genuine curiosity, the kind that hasn't been performed. What was that like? And that simply the conversation began. What she had not prepared for was how easy it was. She had prepared for awkward. She had prepared for the particular stiffness that happens when a relationship tries to migrate between 2 different registers, professional to personal, and the new context doesn't know how to hold the weight of everything the previous one had built. She had prepared to feel strange about sitting across from Adrian Romano in a coffee shop, talking about anything that wasn't the restaurant. She had not prepared for the version of him that showed up. He listened. Not politely, not the performance of listening while waiting to speak. He actually listened with the focused attention she had seen him apply to business situations, but directed entirely at her. When she talked about growing up in Queens, about the specific combination of close quarters intensity and strange freedom that defines that neighborhood, he asked questions that proved he had heard the previous answer. When she mentioned DeMarcus for the first time just in passing, the way she always mentioned him, like a fact about herself rather than a story, he said quietly, "How old was he when your mother got sick?" And she realized he had been paying enough attention to do the math. 17, she said. He was 17, I was 22. That's young to take that on. I didn't think about whether it was young, she said. It just was what it was. You do that a lot, he said. Accept difficult things without making them into a narrative about yourself. She looked at him. Most people, he said, when something hard happens to them, they carry it as a story about who they are, why they are the way they are. It becomes part of the performance of themselves. He held his coffee cup. You don't do that. You just absorb it and keep going, without the story. Is that good or bad? She said. It's remarkable, he said simply. The directness of it sat in the air between them. No softening, no qualification. Just the true thing said plainly. Lucia looked at her coffee. Your turn, she said. Tell me something true. He didn't hesitate. She had expected a pause, some navigation, some selection of a truth that was safe enough to offer. There was no pause. I've been afraid of this conversation for 3 years, he said. Not of you, of what it would mean if I had it. Because I'd been telling myself the wall was for practical reasons, the business, the security situation, the need to keep personal and professional separate. And if I sat across from you in a room that had nothing to do with Romano's and discovered that the wall was actually... He stopped. What? She said. Grief, he said. The wall was grief. For a version of my own life that I decided was inaccessible when I was about 25 years old and decided to stay in the business my father built. She was very still. I made peace with not having things, he said. Ordinary things. Things most people take for granted. Somebody knowing your name and meaning something by it. A conversation that doesn't have an agenda. Ordinary things. Things most people take for granted. Somebody knowing your name and meaning something by it. A conversation that doesn't have an agenda. I made peace with it because the alternative was wanting it, and wanting things you can't have is a particular kind of suffering I decided I wasn't willing to sustain. So you stopped wanting, she said. I stopped showing it, he said. I am not sure I ever stopped wanting. Lucia looked at this man, this controlled, armored, genuinely lonely man sitting across from her in a mismatched chair in a coffee shop in the West Village, and felt something she was not going to name yet, open in her chest. Adrian, she said. Yes. I'm going to say something and I need you to hear it clearly. Say it. I'm not afraid of you, she said. I know that might be surprising given everything, but I'm not. I've never been. She paused. What I'm afraid of is what happens to a person who gets close to someone at the center of something dangerous. Not to me. I can handle danger. I grew up handling things. She breathed. Marcus can't. And he's still the thing I protect first. Before anything else. Before myself, honestly. Adrian was quiet for a moment, looking at her with that careful, complete attention. I understand, he said. Do you? Protecting someone you love at the expense of what you want for yourself, he said. Yes, I understand that exactly. She believed him. And that was the thing she had not expected, that she would believe him. That the thing he said would land with the quality of genuine truth, rather than the quality of something said to get past her guard. She believed him because she had watched him for 3 years. Because she knew the difference between performance and authenticity in this man. Because she had seen what he looked like when he was real, and what he looked like when he was managing, and right now in this coffee shop, he was real. Tell me about the restructure, she said. Honestly, not the version for investors. The version for someone trying to understand who you're trying to become. He looked at her for one moment, and then he told her. It took 40 minutes. Not the details, not the specifics that would have been either inappropriate or incomprehensible, without context, but the shape of it. What he was trying to get away from. What he was trying to build instead. The reason Rourke mattered. The reason Reyes was a problem. The slow, careful architecture of a man trying to migrate his life from one territory to another without losing everything he had built in the process. She listened the way she had learned to listen, completely, without filling the space. When he finished, she said, "How long have you been planning this?" 2 years of serious planning, he said. 7 years of wanting to. What stopped you for 5 years? He looked at her. I didn't think I had enough to lose, he said. To make the risk of changing worth it. She heard what that meant. She let it sit. And now, she said. He held her gaze. Now I think I might. The coffee shop moved around them. Orders being called a child. Laughing, 2 tables over. The sound of the city doing its enormous ordinary business through the glass. And in the middle of all of it, Lucia Bennett and Adrian Romano sat in the specific silence of 2 people who have just said something real and are deciding what to do with it. This is complicated, she said. Yes, he said. You're in the middle of something dangerous that isn't resolved yet. Yes, and Reyes knows I exist. He went very still. How do you know that? Because I watched him look at you after he spoke to me, she said. And I've been thinking about that look for 4 days. It wasn't social. It was tactical. She looked at him directly. He's going to use me as leverage, isn't he? A pause. Very brief. Containing a decision. He's going to try, Adrian said. And you were going to tell me when. I was going to handle it before it became something you needed to know about. She looked at him. The look was patient and direct and entirely unimpressed. That, she said carefully, is exactly the kind of decision that will end this before it starts. Making choices that affect me without telling me. I understand the instinct. I do. You're used to managing threats by containing information. But I am not something to be managed, Adrian. If I'm in this, whatever this is, I'm in it with full information, both directions. He held her gaze. You're right, he said, without hesitation. Without defensiveness. She had expected resistance. The absence of it landed harder than resistance would have. He asked about you after the event, Adrian said. Through a third party. I'm accelerating the restructure documents, the legal separation from Reyes's network, to close the window before he can use whatever he's building. I expect it to take 2 weeks, not 3. Vincent is handling the details. He looked at her. That's everything I know. That's everything I should have told you before today. She nodded slowly. Thank you, she said. I'm not accustomed to this, he said. Telling someone everything. I want you to know I understand that it's not optional with you. It's not a preference. It's the thing that makes it possible. Yes, she said. It is. He reached across the table. Not for her hand, he stopped short of that, his hand resting on the table between them. An offering. A question. She looked at his hand. Then she looked at him. She turned her hand over and let it rest against his. Not clutching, not gripping, just there. Both of them aware of it. Both of them making a choice. 2 weeks, she said. 2 weeks, he confirmed. You close the window with Reyes, and then we figure out what this looks like with that knot hanging over it. Yes, he said. She didn't move her hand. Adrian. Yes, for what it's worth, she said. I think the version of your life you wrote off at 25, it's still there. It didn't go anywhere. She looked at him steadily. You just needed someone to tell you it was still an option. He was quiet for a long moment. Something moved through his face that she had only seen once before, briefly involuntarily at the end of the investor event. The real version. The one underneath everything. I've been waiting, he said quietly, for someone I trusted enough to hear that from. The coffee shop continued its ordinary business around them. The child laughed again at the next table. The city breathed outside. Lucia Bennett sat across from Adrian Romano, with her hand resting against his, and felt the precise, terrifying, clarifying sensation of a person who has just made a decision they have no intention of taking back. She was not invisible to him. She had never been invisible to him. And for the first time in 3 years, she stopped pretending she didn't know exactly what that meant. What neither of them knew in that coffee shop in the West Village on an ordinary October Saturday was that Damian Reyes had received a phone call 48 hours earlier. The call had lasted 11 minutes, and at the end of it, the man on the other end whose name Lucia had never heard, and whose connection to Adrian Romano's past went back further than the restructure, further than the current business arrangements, further than anything Vincent had yet mapped, had said 4 words. Find his weakness first. Reyes had already found it, and the 2 weeks Adrian had promised were about to become considerably more complicated. The 11 days after Saturday were the quietest of Adrian Romano's professional life and the most dangerous. On the surface, nothing changed. The restaurant ran. The restructured documents moved through Marchetti's office with the careful speed of legal work that needs to be airtight rather than fast. Vincent managed the operational details with the same flat efficiency he brought to everything. Adrian attended 3 business meetings, 2 dinners, and 1 city council event that was important for reasons he could not publicly explain. He returned every call. He signed every document that needed signing. Underneath the surface, he was running a parallel operation that only he and Vincent knew the full shape of. Reyes had moved faster than expected. The first sign came on day 3, when one of Vincent's contacts in the Bronx flagged a conversation partial second-hand, unreliable, in the way that all information from that particular channel was unreliable but consistent with everything else they were seeing. Reyes was not simply applying pressure to the business arrangement. He was building a case, not a legal one. Reyes had no interest in legal mechanisms. He was building the kind of case that gets delivered in a private conversation in a room with no witnesses, after which the person receiving it either complies or faces consequences that don't appear in any court record. The leverage he was assembling was not financial. It was personal. Vincent put the file on Adrian's desk on day 5 without a word. Adrian read it without expression. Then he closed it. Then he sat for a long time looking at the wall. How much does he have? He said finally. Enough to be uncomfortable, Vincent said. Not enough to be decisive, yet. Timeline. If he moves at his usual pace, you have 10 days. If he's accelerating, which he may be given that the restructure filing is going to hit public record the moment Marchetti submits, possibly 5. The board meeting is in 6 days. I know. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Does he know about Saturday? Vincent's pause was very brief. I don't know. Possibly. Adrian stood up from his desk, walked to the window, looked at the city below him, all that ordinary movement, all those people going about the business of their lives without any awareness of the conversations happening in certain rooms above them. She needs to know, he said, before he makes a move, not after. Adrian. I told her everything goes both directions, he said. I meant it. Vincent was quiet for a moment. If you tell her, he said carefully, she may decide it's too much. That's her decision to make, Adrian said. Not mine. The silence held. You've changed, Vincent said. Not an accusation, not even an observation exactly, just a fact said plainly by a man who had known him long enough to measure the distance. Yes, Adrian said. I have. He called her that evening. She picked up on the second ring, which told him she had been awake. It was 10:45, and she had been at the restaurant since noon. He knew her schedule the way he knew all his operational details without having to think about it. Something's happened, he said. No preamble. She had told him what she needed, and he was not going to perform normalcy at her. A pause. Tell me, he told her. All of it. The file Vincent had assembled the timeline, the nature of what Reyes was building. He kept it clear and factual, and did not soften it into something easier to hear, because she had specifically told him not to do that, and because she was not someone who needed things softened. When he finished, the silence on her end lasted 8 seconds. He's going after Marcus, she said. It was not a question. She had understood the architecture of it faster than most people he worked with would have. Not directly, he said. But Marcus is the most visible thing in your life. The tuition payments, the enrollment records, it's all publicly accessible if you know where to look and have the right people looking. What does he want to do with it? Pressure me through you, he said. If he can demonstrate that pulling certain strings will disrupt your life, your brother's situation specifically, he has a mechanism. He's not going to hurt anyone. This is leverage, not violence. But leverage requires the other person to believe the threat is real. Another silence. Is it real? She said. The threat is real, he said. The execution depends on whether I give him an opportunity, which I'm not going to. How? The board meeting is in 6 days. Once the restructure files, Reyes loses his position inside the organizational structure entirely. No position means no leverage. The legal separation is the mechanism that ends this. He paused. But 6 days is 6 days. What do you need from me? She said. The question stopped him. In 38 years, in all the complicated situations he had navigated, no one had ever asked him that with that specific quality. Not what are you going to do? Not what does this mean for me? What do you need from me? Like they were in it together. Like the question of burden sharing was obvious and primary. He had to clear his throat. I need you to tell me if anything feels wrong, he said. Anyone you don't recognize paying attention to you. Anyone asking questions about you or Marcus that seems off. He paused. And I need you to let me put one of my people close. Close how? A driver for the next 6 days, to and from work wherever you need to go. Not visible to you unless you want them to be, just there. I expected resistance. She had established very clearly that she was not a person who needed protection as a form of control. Instead, she said, "Will it compromise your operation if I say no?" No, he said. It's your choice. Then yes, she said. Because it's practical, not because I'm scared. I know, he said. Adrian. Her voice had something in it. He was learning to read the register she used when she was about to say something she had thought carefully about. Thank you for calling me. For telling me tonight instead of managing it and telling me after. I said I would. A lot of people say things, she said. You did it. He held the phone against his ear and felt the specific weight of that, the simple enormous thing of being trusted by someone who had thought carefully about whether to trust you. Get some sleep, he said. You have a double shift tomorrow. I know my schedule, she said, and he could hear the slight smile in it. Good night, Lucia. Good night, Adrian. He set the phone down. He looked at the wall for a long time. Then he called Vincent and told him to finalize the board arrangements for the accelerated timeline. Marcus found out on day 7. Not because Lucia told him she hadn't decided yet. How much to tell him was still weighing honesty against the particular protectiveness she'd carried for him since he was 17. He found out because he was 20 years old and curious, and had noticed the black car parked outside the building 2 mornings in a row, and had asked the driver directly who he was waiting for. The driver, a quiet man named Paul, who Vincent had selected specifically for discretion, had said he wasn't at liberty to say. which was to a 20-year-old with a functioning brain essentially an answer. Marcus was sitting at the kitchen table when Lucia got home from her shift, and the quality of his stillness when she walked in told her immediately. "Who's the guy in the car?" he said. She put her bag down, sat across from him. She told him enough. Not everything, not the specific details of Reyes, not the machinery of it, but enough. That she was involved with someone. That the someone was complicated. That there was a situation being resolved, and in the meantime, there was a driver, because the someone was the kind of person who did things like that. Marcus listened with the focused, unreadable expression he got when he was processing something he hadn't expected. When she finished, he said, "Romano." She looked at him. "The driver works for Romano's restaurant," Marcus said. "I checked the plates. It wasn't hard." He held her gaze. "Adrian Romano." "Yes," she said. A pause. Several things moved through her brother's face in quick succession. Surprise, calculation, something protective, and then something that settled into a particular kind of stillness. "He's dangerous," Marcus said. "He's complicated," she said. "Lucia, he's not complicated. He's—" "Marcus." Her voice was steady. "I know what he is. I have worked for him for 3 years. I have watched him make decisions, manage situations, treat people. I know the whole picture, not just the name." She looked at her brother directly. "He's trying to change it, the business, what it is. He's been working on it for 2 years, and he's days away from completing the structural change that separates him from the parts of it you're worried about." Marcus looked at her for a long time. "And you trust him," he said. "I trust what I've seen," she said. "Which is not the same as blind trust. It's the same kind of trust I give anything earned specific with clear conditions." Her brother drummed his fingers twice on the table, the gesture he'd had since he was 12 when he was working something out. "Does he know about you?" Marcus said. "About what you actually, who you actually are, not the waitress, you." "He's been learning," she said. "And he's—" Marcus stopped, started again. "Does he see you right?" The question caught her somewhere unguarded. She thought about Saturday morning in the coffee shop. The 40 minutes. The hand on the table. The grief he had named without being asked to name it. The way he had looked at her when she said the version of your life you wrote off at 25 is still there. "Yes," she said. "He sees me right." Marcus sat with that. Then he stood up, went to the counter, and poured himself a glass of water, with the slightly exaggerated calm of a young man working very hard not to make this about him. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. "He still sounds terrifying," Marcus said. "But okay." She almost laughed. "He is a little terrifying," she admitted. "Great," Marcus said. "Amazing. That's very reassuring." This time she did laugh. Brief and genuine, and releasing something that had been tight in her chest for 6 days. Her brother turned around and pointed at her with his water glass. "If he hurts you," Marcus said, "I will." He stopped. "I have absolutely no follow-through on that threat, but I will think of something." "He won't," she said. "You sound sure." "I am," she said, and she was. That was the thing she had been sitting with and testing for 11 days, the question of whether what she felt was clarity or wishful thinking. Whether the Adrian she had seen in the coffee shop and on the phone and in the private dining room was the real architecture of the man, or a version being performed for her benefit. She kept returning to the same conclusion. A man who performs warmth for 3 years without anyone watching does not perform it. A man who spent 3 years learning the names of his staff without using them. Watching a waitress protect a young coworker from a rude guest, adjusting the entire trajectory of his professional life, because something cracked that man was not performing. He was being. Slowly, carefully, at significant cost to himself being. She was sure. Day 9 arrived with a phone call to Adrian's private line at 7 in the morning. It was not a number many people had. The fact that Reyes had it was itself a message. "We should have a conversation," Reyes said. His voice had the easy quality of a man who believes he holds all the cards, which Adrian had learned over 15 years was the most dangerous quality a man in his position could project. It meant he wasn't bluffing. "We're having one now," Adrian said. A proper one, in person. There's a situation developing that affects both of us, and I think you'll want to hear what I have to say before the board meeting. The mention of the board meeting was deliberate. It meant Reyes knew the timeline. When and where, Adrian said. Tonight. My place. A pause. Come alone. This isn't a hostile conversation. I simply have information you'll want. Adrian was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. 7 o'clock, he said. He hung up. Looked at Vincent, who had been in the room for the entire call. He knows about the board meeting, Adrian said. Yes, Vincent said. He has someone inside Marchetti's office. I need to know who. Already working on it. Vincent's jaw was tight. Adrian, don't go tonight. I have to. He said come alone, which means he wants a conversation without witnesses, which means whatever he hasn't decided yet whether to deploy it or trade it. Adrian stood. If he wanted to use it, he'd have used it. He's offering a deal. I need to know what the deal is. And if the deal is Lucia... The room went very still. Meaning what? Adrian said. His voice had dropped to the register Vincent had heard perhaps 4 times in 15 years. The one that had nothing theatrical about it. Meaning if his position is walk away from the restructure, maintain the existing arrangement, and she stays out of whatever he's building. Vincent met his gaze steadily. He's smart enough to know that a direct threat doesn't work with you. But an offer of protection framed as a favor, that's a different kind of lever. Adrian looked at the window for a long moment. I thought about Lucia's voice on the phone 9 days ago. What do you need from me? He thought about her hand on the table. He thought about 3 years of watching her handle everything life threw at her with a grace he had no adequate word for. He thought about what it would mean to make a decision about her life without consulting her. Call her, he said. Vincent blinked. What? Call Lucia. Tell her I need to speak with her before 7. Tell her it's about tonight. He picked up his jacket. She told me this goes both directions. That means she gets to know what Reyes might offer before I walk into that room. Vincent stared at him for a moment. You know, he said slowly, I've worked with you for 15 years, and I have never once seen you consult someone before walking into a negotiation. I've never had someone worth consulting, Adrian said. He walked out of the office. Vincent stood alone in the room for a moment. Then he picked up his phone. She met him at the restaurant, not the main floor. The private dining room again at 5 in the afternoon, both of them knowing that this time the stakes were different. He told her everything. What Reyes had said. What Vincent believed the offer would be. What walking into that meeting tonight could mean, and what the alternative was. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, What do you want to do? I want to go, he said. Hear him out. Understand what he actually has. Because walking into a board meeting while he still holds something I haven't mapped is a risk I'm not willing to take for the people who are depending on that filing going through. And if his offer is what Vincent thinks it is, he looked at her. Then I need to know what you want, he said. Because I'm not making that decision unilaterally. She stared at him. She had not expected that. She had prepared for him to tell her what he had decided. She had prepared to respond to a decision already made because that was her experience of powerful men. They decided, and then they informed, and then they expected acceptance. He was asking her, if he offers to leave Marcus and me alone in exchange for you maintaining the current arrangement, she said slowly, you'd be staying tied to something you've spent 2 years trying to get free of. For me. For you, he confirmed. And if you say no, if you go through with the filing regardless. He deploys whatever he has, Adrian said, which disrupts your life in ways I'm still mapping. Not permanently, not irrevocably, but genuinely. She sat with this. No, she said. He waited. Don't take the offer, she said. If that's what it is, don't stay in a situation you're trying to leave because of me. That's not... She shook her head. That's not what I'm here for. I'm not someone you make yourself smaller to protect. You go into that meeting, you hear what he has, and you do what's right for the restructure. Lucia, I can handle disruption, she said. Her voice was steady and direct and completely genuine. I've been handling disruption since I was 16 years old. Whatever he can do to my life, I can manage it. What I cannot manage is watching you sacrifice 2 years of work, the direction you're choosing, because you're trying to keep me comfortable. She looked at him. That's not love. That's control. Even when it's kind. The word landed between them. Love. She had said it without meaning to, or without meaning to yet, and they both heard it. He was very still. Okay, he said, quietly. Okay. I hear you. He held her gaze. I go tonight. I don't take the offer. He paused. But I need you to do something for me. What? Take Marcus somewhere tonight. Not your apartment. Denise's place, a hotel, wherever. Just not somewhere he knows. She looked at him. Is it that serious? Probably not, but I prefer to be wrong about the cautious call than right about the reckless one. She nodded. All right. And Lucia. He said her name with that specific quality again, the one that made it mean more than the syllables. After tonight, this is over. One way or another, this particular situation ends. I need you to believe that. She looked at him for a long moment. I believe you, she said. He reached across the table and touched her hand. Briefly. Just his fingers against her knuckles, present and gone. Then he stood. I'll call you when I'm out, he said. I'll be awake, she said. The meeting with Reyes lasted 42 minutes. Vincent knew this because he was 3 blocks away in a car with 2 people he trusted completely. Tracking Adrian's phone signal with the specific anxiety of a man who has kept another man alive for 15 years and has no intention of stopping. At minute 43. Adrian walked out of the building. He got in the car. He looked straight ahead for a moment. Well, Vincent said. He offered exactly what you thought he'd offer, Adrian said. Stay in the arrangement. He drops everything he's built. We go back to the previous structure. And I told him no. Adrian's voice was flat and certain. I told him the filing goes through in 3 days regardless of what he does with whatever he has. I told him the window is closed. He paused. And then I told him what it would cost him if he went after anyone in my personal life. Vincent was quiet for a moment. How did he take it? He's not used to people saying no when he believes he has leverage, Adrian said. He'll spend 48 hours convincing himself I'll reconsider. By the time he accepts that I won't, the filing will be done. And if he moves in those 48 hours anyway, then we deal with it. He looked at Vincent. She's with Denise tonight. Marcus is with her. They're covered. You told her? I told her everything. Vincent drove for a moment in silence. What did Reyes actually have? He said. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Enough to make things uncomfortable. Not enough to do real damage. He'd inflated the threat, built it up to look like more than it was. It's what he does. He sells fear as a service. He looked out the window. The moment I walked in and didn't react the way he expected, he lost half the leverage. Because leverage only works if the other person is afraid of it. And you weren't afraid. I was afraid of the wrong thing for 3 years, Adrian said. I'm not afraid of Damian Reyes. Vincent looked at him sideways. What were you afraid of? He said. Adrian said nothing for a moment. Wanting something I didn't know how to hold, he said finally. Being responsible for something that mattered. Someone that mattered. The car moved through the city. And now, Vincent said. Now I'm learning, Adrian said. He called her at 9:14. She picked up on the first ring. It's done, he said. The breath she released was quiet, but he heard it. The specific quality of relief that a person makes when they have been holding tension they didn't fully acknowledge they were carrying. Are you okay? She said. Yes. He paused. Are you? We're at Denise's, she said. Marcus discovered she has a PlayStation and has apparently forgotten that anything was ever concerning. He heard the smile in it. Felt something in his chest respond to it the way it always did, now direct and undeniable, and completely unlike anything he'd felt at 35 or 30 or 25. "The board meeting is in 3 days," he said. "After the filing, Reyes has no mechanism. Whatever he was building collapses." "3 days," she said. "Yes." A pause. The comfortable kind, the kind that has known itself long enough not to need filling. "Adrian," she said. "Yes. You did it right tonight," she said, "going in without taking the easy exit." "You made it clear what the right call was," he said. "No," she said. "I told you what I wanted. You made the call. Those are different things." He was quiet for a moment. "Lucia," he said, "when this is settled, the filing, Reyes, all of it, I'd like to talk to you about something." "What?" "Your program," he said. "The restaurant management idea. The thing you've been building in your head." He paused. "I found the notebook." Silence. "What notebook?" she said, and her voice had a different quality now, slightly surprised, slightly exposed. "The one you left on the staff table 3 months ago," he said, "with the operational notes, the service flow charts, the customer experience frameworks." He paused. "I read 4 pages before I realized what it was, and then I read the rest of it." Absolute silence. "That was private," she said. "I know, I'm sorry." He meant it. "But Lucia, what's in that notebook is not the work of a waitress. It's the work of someone who should be running a restaurant. Possibly more than one." She was quiet for a long moment. "It's just notes," she said. "It's a business plan," he said. "You just haven't called it that yet." Another silence. He let it breathe. "We'll talk about it," she said finally. Not a dismissal. A genuine agreement. The specific tone of someone who has kept a dream carefully folded for so long that having someone else name it feels almost unbearably vulnerable. "Yes," he said. "We will." "After the 3 days," she said. "After the 3 days," he confirmed. "Good night, Adrian." "Good night, Lucia." He held the phone for a moment after she hung up. 3 days. He had built an entire empire, one careful decision at a time. He had navigated 15 years of a world that rewarded ruthlessness and punished sentiment. He had maintained control over his own interior life with a discipline that had cost him more than he had ever admitted to any living person. And now he was sitting in the back of a car at 9:15 at night, counting 3 days the way a person counts the last few steps to somewhere they'd stopped believing they would reach. It was, he thought, the most human he had felt in a very long time. The 3 days passed, not quietly the filing process required. Adrian's constant attention. 2 late nights at Marchetti's office. 1. Confrontation with a board member who had received what appeared to be outside pressure to delay the vote, and a conversation between Vincent and Reyes's lawyer that ended with a specific legal warning delivered in language that left no room for interpretation. But they passed. On the morning of the 3rd day, Lucia was on the restaurant floor, her normal section, her uniform, her comfortable invisible self, when Marco appeared at her elbow. "Board approved," he said, matter of fact, the way Marco delivered everything. She looked at him. "The restructure filing," he said. "It went through this morning, official as of 9 a.m. He held her gaze for a moment, just a moment, with a quality that was not Marco's usual efficiency, but something more human underneath it. "I thought you'd want to know." He walked away before she could respond. Lucia stood in the middle of the floor. Around her, the restaurant moved through its morning service with complete normality. Plates moved, coffee poured. Conversations floated in from the street as the lunch crowd began to arrive. The whole ordinary machinery of the world continuing to operate exactly as it always had. She pressed her hand briefly against her sternum. Then her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. 1 message. 3 words. "It's done." Tonight, she read it twice. Then she typed back, "Yes." She put the phone in her pocket and picked up her order pad and went back to work, because work was what she did, and it was what she was good at, and the shift needed to be run. But for the first time in 3 years, she moved through that floor not as someone invisible, not as someone performing steadiness, not as someone carrying the weight of everything alone, as someone who knew specifically and clearly that at the end of the shift there was a person waiting for her who had seen the whole of her, the notebook, the double shifts, the grief folded underneath the composure, and had chosen her, not despite it, but because of it. She carried that through the whole shift. It was, she thought, the best thing she had ever carried. The dinner that night was not at Romano's. I took her to a small place in Brooklyn that had 16 tables and no reservation system, and pasta that took 40 minutes because someone in the kitchen was making it by hand while they waited. It was by every measurable standard the least impressive restaurant Adrian Romano had ever sat in. He had chosen it deliberately. She understood that without being told. They sat across from each other and ordered without looking too hard at the menu and talked for 3 hours about everything that had been waiting behind the professional distance and the Reyes situation and the careful management of the previous 3 weeks. They talked about her mother, really talked about her. Not just the medical bills, but the woman herself, who had been funny and stubborn and had taught Lucia to cook by refusing to write anything down on the grounds that real cooking lived in your hands, not on paper. They talked about his father, which was harder, the specific, complicated grief of inheriting something from someone you loved and resented simultaneously. They talked about Marcus and his B+, and the fact that he wanted to study urban planning, and what that meant for a kid who had grown up watching his neighborhood get slowly priced out of its own identity. They talked about the notebook. That was the conversation that mattered most. She had been carrying it for a year, the operational framework she'd built in her own head, refined during slow shifts and late nights. The thing she had never called a business plan, because calling it that made it real, and real things could fail. He laid it out the way he saw it, which was different from the way she had been seeing it. And the difference was not that he saw it bigger. She had always seen it big in the private geography of her own ambition, but that he saw it as achievable, specific, stepwise. Not a dream sitting on a shelf, but a plan waiting for resources. There's a space, he said. 2 blocks from here, actually. Ground floor of a building I own. It's been empty for 8 months because the tenant I wanted fell through, and I haven't found the right use for it. She looked at him. I'm not offering to hand you something, he said immediately, reading her expression with the accuracy she had come to expect from him. I'm offering to be the investor. You'd be the operator. Completely separate structures, your name on the license, your vision, your decisions. I provide the capital and the property, you build what's in that notebook. She held his gaze. Why? She said. Because what's in that notebook would work, he said. I've been in this business for 15 years. I know what works, and I know what's a good idea that someone doesn't have the resources to execute. What you built in those pages is the second thing. It just needs the first thing. And if it fails, she said. Then it fails, he said. And we figure out what comes next. He paused. But it won't fail. You don't know that. I know you, he said. That's the same thing. She sat with that for a long moment. The pasta arrived. Neither of them acknowledged it for a full 10 seconds. I need to think about it, she said. Of course, he said. Not because I don't want it, she said. Because I need to be sure the structure is right before I say yes. I don't want to be running your restaurant. I want to be running my restaurant that happens to be in your building with your investment. That's exactly what I'm describing, he said. I know, she said. But I need to hear myself say it out loud to make sure I believe it. He looked at her with that expression she had learned, the one that was not quite a smile, but that lived in the same territory. The real version. The one she had seen for the first time at the investor event, and had been carrying around ever since. Take the time you need, he said. She picked up her fork. 2 days, she said. 2 days, he agreed. She took a bite of pasta. It was in fact extraordinary. She said yes in 48 hours, not because she stopped being careful. She had spent those 2 days going through the notebook again, building the operational plan from the framework into something with actual numbers, calling a woman she knew from a hospitality program who had successfully opened her own place 3 years ago, and asking every practical question she could think of. She said yes because the more she examined it, the more solid it looked. Because the space he described fit the concept she had built. Because the structure he proposed held up when she stress tested it. Because when she called the hospitality lawyer whose card Marco had given her 2 years ago, for reasons she had never understood until now, the lawyer told her the arrangement as described was clean and fair and legally sound. She said yes because it was the right decision, and because she was not someone who walked away from right decisions out of fear. She told him over the phone. His response was 2 words, "Good, Saturday." "Saturday what?" she said. "We look at the space," he said. "Bring the notebook." She brought the notebook. The space was right. She knew it within 4 minutes of walking in. Not because it was perfect, it needed work. The kitchen footprint was smaller than ideal. The natural light came from the wrong direction for a lunch service. But the bones were right. The flow was right. The feel of it, the specific quality of potential that a space has before anyone has made decisions about it, was exactly what she had been imagining in the abstract for a year. She walked the perimeter twice without speaking. Adrian stood near the entrance and did not follow her, or hover, or offer commentary. He understood without being told that she needed to read the space on her own terms. When she came back to where he was standing, she had the notebook open. "The kitchen needs to extend 8 feet north," she said. "There's room for it based on the structural diagram you sent. That gives me the line configuration I need without compromising the dining room square footage." "I'll get a contractor in Monday," he said. "The front-of-house flow goes counterclockwise," she said. "Most restaurants do clockwise because it feels natural, but counterclockwise reduces server crossover traffic by about 30% at peak service." I was looking at her with an expression she had not seen before on his face. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "Keep going. The bar goes on the east wall, not the south. South gets the afternoon light, which is better for the dining room." She was flipping pages in the notebook. "I want to call it Bennett's, with 2 T's. He paused. "Your name?" "My mother's name," she said. "She spelled it with 2 T's. Family thing." He was quiet for a moment. "Bennett's," he said. "Yes." She looked up from the notebook. He was still watching her with that expression. "You're doing it again," she said. "What? Looking at me like I walked through a door you didn't know existed." He considered that. "You keep opening doors I didn't know were there," he said. "I'm getting accustomed to the experience." She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked back at the space, her space, the space that was going to become something, and felt the specific joy of a person who has been working toward something for so long that when it starts becoming real, it doesn't feel like a rival. It feels like recognition. Like something that was always supposed to happen, finally beginning to happen. "Let's talk to the contractor Monday," she said. "I'll set it up," he said. She closed the notebook. "Adrian." "Yes. Thank you," she said. "Not for the space, for seeing it. In the notebook before I showed it to you." She held his gaze. "You saw it before I was ready to let anyone see it." He looked at her steadily. "You've been visible to me," he said, "from the first week you walked into my restaurant. The rest of the world just took longer to catch up." The months that followed were the hardest and best of her life, often simultaneously. The renovation took 8 weeks. She spent them working her regular shifts at Romano's during the day and meeting with contractors, suppliers, and designers in the evenings and on weekends, running on coffee and the specific adrenaline of someone building something real. Marcus helped her draft the staff handbook on 3 consecutive Sunday afternoons, sitting at the kitchen table in Queens, with her laptop between them, arguing cheerfully about the section on customer complaint resolution, until they arrived at language they both respected. Adrian was present without being dominant. That was the thing she had feared most, that giving him access to the project would mean slowly ceding control of it, that his resources and instincts and 15 years of operational experience would gradually crowd out her vision until she was running his concept with her name on the door. It didn't happen. He offered opinions when she asked for them, and held them back when she didn't, and understood the difference between the 2 situations, with an accuracy that she had stopped being surprised by. He had learned to listen. She suspected he had always known how. He had just never had someone worth listening to. She hired 7 people. Every single one of them came from a background she understood people who were good at the work and had been overlooked for it. People who had spent years being background in rooms where they should have been central. Thomas was one of them. He cried a little in the parking lot after the interview and then collected himself and shook her hand with a formality that made her want to laugh, and she didn't, because she respected that it mattered to him. "You're serious about this," he said, as if he was still calibrating to the reality of it. "I've always been serious," she said. "I just now have the means to show it." Denise came on board as bar manager 3 weeks before opening. The conversation that led to that decision happened in the same diner where they had always had their best conversations. The one 2 blocks from Romano's, the one with the fries and the late-night hours and the particular quality of fluorescent light that was not flattering but was honest. Denise had been managing the Romano's bar for 4 years and was the best Lucia had ever seen at reading a room through its drink orders, which was an underrated and highly specific skill. "You're going to say you need me," Denise said, pointing a fry at her. "I'm going to say you'd be better used somewhere you have more authority over the whole floor culture," Lucia said. "Which happens to be true and also happens to benefit me." "That's very smooth," Denise said. "You've been spending time with a man who negotiates for a living." "I negotiate just fine on my own." "The offer," Denise said. Lucia told her the terms. Salary, equity, stake, decision-making authority over the bar program and the wine list. Denise ate a fry. "You gave me equity," she said. "You're building part of it," Lucia said. "You should own part of it." Denise was quiet for a moment. It was the longest Lucia had ever seen her quiet. "I've been bartending for 9 years, she said. "Nobody has ever offered me equity." "I know," Lucia said. "I'm in," Denise said. "Obviously I'm in. I was in before you got to the equity part." She pointed the fry again. "But the equity makes you a genuinely excellent person." "I'm aware," Lucia said. Denise threw a napkin at her. Lucia caught it. They both laughed, the real kind, unguarded, the kind that belongs to women who have been honest with each other for long enough that they don't have to perform anything anymore. The opening was on a Thursday night in March. Lucia had chosen Thursday deliberately. Not Friday, not Saturday. The nights when restaurants filled themselves with people who were going out because it was the weekend, and going out was what you did on weekends. Thursday brought people who had specifically decided to be there, who had looked at their week and picked this night and made a choice. She wanted her first night full of people who had chosen it. She was in the space at 7 in the morning. She walked the floor, the way she had walked every floor she had ever worked, methodically, attentively, testing each table setting, checking each sightline, running through the service flow in her head, with the muscle memory of someone who had done this 10,000 times in other people's restaurants and was doing it for the first time in her own. The kitchen team arrived at 9. She met them at the door with coffee she had made herself. Thomas arrived at 10, looked at the dining room and said, "This is exactly what you described," with the quiet conviction of someone who had heard the vision a long time ago and was only now seeing that it had been real all along. "Did you think it wouldn't be?" she said. "No," he said. "I always knew it would be. It's different seeing it." "Yeah," she said. "It is." She pressed her hand briefly to the doorframe as she passed through it. The same gesture she had been making since she first walked into the space 8 months ago. A habit. A small private acknowledgement of something she didn't have a precise word for. Adrian arrived at 5. She was in the kitchen going through the final service prep when she heard his voice at the front speaking to Thomas, something brief and professional, and she felt the specific awareness of him that she had stopped pretending not to feel. It had been 5 months since the coffee shop in the West Village. 8 months since the investor event. Almost a year since he had asked for her by name for a night that had changed the entire trajectory of both their lives. He found her in the kitchen. He stopped in the doorway. He looked at her, at the space around her, the team moving with the particular choreographed urgency of opening night preparation. The kitchen, that was exactly what she had sketched in the notebook, and his expression was one she had never seen on him before. Not pride exactly. Something that included pride but was larger than it. Something that a man looks like when he watches someone he loves step fully into who they are. She had learned over the past months that she could call it that. Love. The word had stopped frightening her somewhere around the time she realized it was not diminishing her, but expanding her. Not making her smaller, but making her more precisely herself. "How does it feel?" he said. "Terrifying," she said. "Good terrifying." He came into the kitchen, stopping near enough to speak quietly without the team overhearing. "The reservation list is full tonight. I know. I approved every booking." "Rourke's coming," he said. "She called my office yesterday to ask if she could add 2 to her table." Lucia looked at him. "Diane Rourke is coming to my opening night. She said, and I am quoting directly, that she has been waiting to see what you'd do with a room that was yours." Lucia absorbed that for a moment. "You told her about me," she said. "I told her the truth," he said. "That the woman who secured her meeting at the investor event had opened her own restaurant. The rest, she figured out herself." She shook her head slightly, not in frustration, but in the specific emotion of someone who keeps being surprised by the scope of a change they set in motion, without fully understanding where it would go. "Adrian," she said. "Yes." "Go find your table. Let me run my kitchen." He smiled. The real one, brief, involuntary, the one that transformed his face. She had stopped counting how many times she'd seen it because she had stopped thinking of it as rare. It was still rare in the world. In rooms with her it happened. "Yes, ma'am," he said. He walked out. She turned back to the kitchen and said in the clear, carrying voice she had been developing since she was 22. 45 minutes to service. Let's go." The opening night of Bennett's was by every measure that mattered a success, not a perfect success. The fourth table had a 15-minute wait between courses that was not intentional, and one of the wine allocations ran short earlier than projected, which meant Denise had to pivot to an alternative pairing mid-service, and did it so smoothly that 3 of the affected tables commented positively on the recommendation. The kitchen ran hot in the second hour, but stabilized once Thomas adjusted the rotation. These were normal problems. The problems of a real service, not a rehearsal. Lucia moved through the room the way she had always moved through rooms, present, attentive, precise. But differently, too. Not invisibly. Not as someone keeping herself out of the story. As someone whose name was on the door and whose vision was in every detail of the space, and who had built this from a notebook that had lived in her apron pocket for a year before anyone knew it existed. People saw her. Not because she was wearing an elegant dress, though she was deep green this time. Simple. Exactly right. They saw her because she was there to be seen. Because she was not performing invisibility anymore. Because she had stopped mistaking smallness for safety. Diane Rourke found her near the bar at 9:30. "It's exceptional," Rourke said. Not warmly. Rourke was not a warm woman, which was part of what made her opinion worth something. Directly. As a statement of fact delivered by someone who had been to enough restaurants in enough cities to have calibrated standards. The service model is different. It doesn't feel managed. It feels chosen. "That's what I was going for," Lucia said. "You succeeded." Rourke held her wine glass with the practiced ease of someone who knew what she was drinking. "I'm going to recommend this place to 12 people tomorrow morning. I want you to know that, so you can prepare for what comes next." Lucia looked at her. 12 people, she said. "The right 12, Rourke said. The ones who matter for the kind of place you're building." A pause. "You have something here that's hard to manufacture. Integrity in the service. People feel the difference even when they can't name it." "Thank you," Lucia said. Rourke nodded once, the specific nod of a woman who doesn't repeat compliments and doesn't need to, and moved away. Lucia stood still for a moment. She thought about a Tuesday night 3 years ago, when she had stood at a table while a man deliberately wasted her time to demonstrate that he could. She thought about Marcus in the kitchen, the morning after she got the Bennett's idea, grinning over his coffee. She thought about the notebook and the burgundy dress on the closet door, and Adrian's expression in the private dining room when he'd said, "I know you're not broken." She pressed her hand to her sternum briefly privately and went back to work. At 11, when the last table was finishing dessert, and the kitchen was running its breakdown, and the particular quality of warmth that comes at the end of a successful service had settled over the room, Adrian found her near the host stand. He had spent the evening at his table, his own table, not the corner one from Romano's that he'd occupied for 15 years, but a two-top near the east wall that Lucia had set aside for him when she did the floor plan without telling him she'd done it. He had spoken to people as he always did, but without the operational focus of someone working a room. He had eaten the food. He had watched her work. She could feel without looking when his attention was on her. She had accepted that about herself sometime in the past few months. She had stopped pretending it wasn't true. "It worked," he said. "It worked tonight," she said. "Tonight is one night." "It'll work," he said. "The same reason it worked tonight, because you built something honest." She looked at him. He looked different. She realized then he had looked the first time she'd really seen him. Not the professional observation of an employee reading her employer, but the specific seeing that happened between people who had chosen each other. He looked less armored, not in a way that anyone who didn't know the before version would be able to identify. But she knew the before version. She had studied it for 3 years. The armor was still there. It would probably always be there. It was part of him built into the architecture of who he was, and she had stopped thinking of it as a problem to solve. But it had openings now. Deliberate ones. Places where he had decided one careful choice at a time to let the real version breathe. "I need to tell you something," he said. She waited. "The Marchetti restructure is complete," he said. "Fully. The last filing cleared yesterday. Everything that was connected to the previous arrangement is legally separated." He held her gaze. "I'm clean, Lucia. On paper and in practice. What I've built going forward is what I want it to be." She looked at him. "I know," she said. "Vincent told Marco, and Marco told me this morning." He paused. "Marco told you." "Marco tells me things," she said. "He has for a while. I think he decided I was trustworthy sometime in year 2. Something moved through Adrian's expression that was almost amusement and almost something more serious. "I've been trying to find the right moment to tell you myself," he said. "You found it," she said. "Tonight is the right moment. Tonight is the right moment for everything." He was quiet for a beat. "I'm proud of you," he said, "for all of this. What you built." He looked at the room, her room, Bennett's the thing she had made from a notebook, and 3 years of watching how things should work. And when he looked back at her, it was the full version of his face, nothing held back. For who you are, not who you were forced to become, who you chose to be. Lucia felt it go through her. The truth of it. The specific quality of being seen completely by someone who had been paying attention long enough to see the whole picture. "You're different too," she said. "You know that." "I know," he said. "You made that possible." "No," she said. "I didn't change you. You changed. I just was here while you did it." He shook his head slightly. "You don't understand what that means. Someone being there, being real while you're trying to become something real." He held her gaze. "It's not a small thing, Lucia. It's the whole thing." She looked at this man, this controlled, complicated, genuinely transformed man who had watched her from a corner table for 3 years before he found the courage to say her name like it meant something and felt the certainty that had been growing in her for months settle into something quiet and permanent. "Stay for the cleanup," she said. "I'll make you coffee." He looked at her. "You're going to clean your own restaurant on opening night," he said. "It's my restaurant," she said. "I'll clean it if I want to." The smile, the real one, the involuntary one came, and this time it didn't disappear as fast as it usually did. It stayed a little longer than she had ever seen it stay. "Yes," he said. "I'll stay." They stayed until 1 in the morning. The staff left by midnight with instructions and tips, and Lucia's specific direct gratitude delivered to each person individually, because she had worked for people who did that, and she knew what it meant to be seen on a good night. Thomas was the last to go. He shook her hand at the door with the same formality as the interview, and then apparently deciding formality was insufficient, hugged her briefly and walked out into the night. She and Adrian sat at the bar with coffee she had made herself. The room was quiet, the way rooms are quiet after they have been full, a particular satisfied quality of silence that contains the echo of everything that had been in it. "My mother would have loved this place," Lucia said. Tell me why, he said. She told him. The specific details, the counterclockwise service flow that her mother would have identified immediately as correct. The way the bar was positioned for conversation rather than performance. The handwritten daily specials board that she had insisted on because her mother had kept a handwritten board in their kitchen their whole childhood with whatever was for dinner that night. He listened. He asked about specific things. He remembered what she had told him about her mother in Brooklyn and connected it to what she was saying now with the careful attention of someone who has been assembling a picture for months and is learning new detail. At some point, she stopped talking, and they sat in the quiet of Bennett's at 1 a.m, and she felt with a completeness that she had not felt in a very long time, possibly ever, in this specific way, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. What are you thinking? He said. She considered the honest answer. That 3 years ago I was invisible in a room 2 blocks from here, she said. And now I'm sitting in a room with my name on the door. She looked at her coffee. And that the thing that changed it wasn't the dress or the event or the investor. It was someone paying attention when I thought nobody was. She looked at him. You paid attention first, she said. Before any of it. That matters. He held her gaze for a long moment. You made it impossible not to, he said. She looked at him fully, the way she looked at things she was certain about, and said, Adrian. Yes. I love you. She said. I want you to know that, clearly, not implied, said. The silence that followed had a specific weight and warmth and completeness. I know, he said. Then quietly, with the certainty of a man who has arrived somewhere after a very long distance. I love you, Lucia. She nodded once. She picked up her coffee. They sat together in the quiet of the restaurant she had built in the room she had imagined in a notebook, in an apron pocket, in the space that had her mother's name on the door, in the life she had chosen, with both hands and complete clarity. And outside the city, breathed the way it always did, enormous and indifferent, and completely unaware that something important had just been completed. She had walked into Adrian Romano's world as a waitress. Nobody noticed. She had walked out as the woman who changed. The man who thought he could not be changed, not by softening him, not by saving him, not by making herself smaller so he could feel larger, but by being so completely and unapologetically herself that he had no choice but to become the version of himself that was worthy of her. And in